If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to MINDSHOCK True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and you are listening to the Steven Avery series of Making a Murderer fame. This is episode 39, The Mike Bushman Chronicles. This episode has been a long time in the making, examining the enigma that is Deputy Mike Bushman of the esteemed Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. And we will be going over everything and anything Mike Bushman. As always, if you find the MINDSHOCK podcast interesting and informative, want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon to help spread the word about wrongful convictions such as this one, as well as others. Patrons do get a priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. So, Bushman was, of course, one of these guys who just happened to come out of retirement as soon as there's a missing person. He was one of the officers who actually physically arrested Steven Avery in the 1985 frame-up by Manitowoc County regarding the Penny Bearston assault. We've gone over that many times. Make sure you've listened to the other podcasts or are at least well familiar with the case, not just Making a Murderer, because that was a highly biased documentary, only highlighting about 1% of Manitowoc County and the state of Wisconsin corruption. I mean, just really, really small, minute highlighting of the rampant corruption going on in that county and state. So Bushman, as soon as so Teresa Hallback goes missing, and all of a sudden everyone just assumes it's Avery. As soon as the word Avery is uttered, Mike Bushman all of a sudden scrambles to come out of retirement to pin this on Avery. Does anybody find that suspicious? I mean, this is the same circle of individuals involved in the 85 frame-up, framing Steven Avery when there wasn't a $36 million lawsuit on the line. Very, very curious. I mean, if there are any guilters left, I don't know how they would explain that. But let's go over a few posts here. This is from TikTok Manitowoc, one of the only non-sham subreddits regarding the Steven Avery case. This was posted by Eddie Beavy, The Curious Case of Deputy Bushman. One big player in the game that has flown under the radar, but seems to be one of the more well-connected officers, is a gentleman named Mike Bushman. Some brief history on Deputy Bushman. One of the arresting officers from the 85 rape case. Retired prior to 2005. Retains part-time reserve deputy with Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office, signs into the Avery Salvage Yard for the November 7th search at 7:38 a.m. So this is just for the search. Leads the search that finds the evidence in the burn barrel. Wow, what a coincidence. Also leads the team that finds the Cuss Road burial site. Another coinky-dink. But the oddity with Bushman does not stop with the Avery case. Most people on this sub know of the Hostetler case. So this is the MTSO report, January 28th, 1999. 1,300 hours. There was a meeting on the second floor in the administration. Officers present were Deputy Jost, Deputy P. Herman, Deputy A. Coburn, Deputy Glazier, Detective Sergeant Lank, C.I. Gene Cooch, Inspector Peterson, and me, Lieutenant Mike Bushman. This is quoted from the report. Officers were advised that Deputy Herman was now assigned to this case full-time and will be spearheading the investigation follow-up duties. I was assigned to crack down all Crime Stopper reports and file them together in one location. Detective Nicholson was assigned to provide computer programming to help with timeline, suspects, and suspect vehicles. Deputy Glazier, Deputy Jost, and Deputy Coburn were assigned to check suspect vehicles and follow up on Crime Stopper reports. Detective Sergeant Lank and C.I. Koosh will organize. Detective Conrad will help with the investigation if needed. Deputy Herman will do follow-up investigation of suspects' associates, coordinate and update, and maintain a current list of suspect names and vehicles for the follow-up. So this is 2.5 weeks into the investigation. Notice some familiar names. So this seems to be the crew that comes in to cover up any shady business. Anytime there's shady business in Manitowoc County, these guys seem to be the usual suspects. So he was also asked to start a probe that on the allegations that Herman and his brother had been involved, and declined. These individuals do not investigate themselves. Why is the retired arresting officer from the 85 case involved in a police investigation that has been turned over to Calumet County because of conflict of interest? How is this guy not higher on our lists of crooked cops in the county? So many questions with this guy. Edit. He's also connected to the Carmen Bootwell overdose. October 2001, Bootwell was cremated at a funeral home owned by the spouse of Lieutenant Mike Bushman, who was one of the officers who arrested Avery in 85 and who later participated in the search of the area in and around Avery Auto Salvage. Wow, is this coincidence stack high enough for even the most devout coincidence theorist? Does anybody find that strange? So, Carmen Bootwell, the cousin of Teresa Hallbeck. Now, if you haven't checked out the Bootwell episode, make sure you check that out. I mean, just highly suspicious under many counts. But his in-laws own this funeral home where it just so happens that she's cremated. Again, not the only funeral home in the area. This isn't the middle of absolute nowhere. There's a decent-sized population in that county, so a lot of different funeral homes out there. So the response is here. Bushman was retired. His wife's funeral home cremates Bootwell. Then he shows up to volunteer search and finds the remains in the burn barrel and the Cuss Road burial ground, which was marked off, and Lank and Coburn secure the scene. Isn't it kind of funny that nobody except Bushman is able to find anything? It's Bushman, Lank, and Coburn that are finding everything. I mean, it's kind of weird. They have to have a guy come out of retirement to find stuff. Why isn't anybody else finding anything? You can't make this expletive up. Even if the remains are Teresa Hallbeck's, Mike Bushman's in-laws, which I'm sure at that age he's very close with, own a funeral home with cremation capabilities. He could have burned Teresa Hallbeck or taken some of Bootwell's remains, shown up at Avery's, and planted the bones to get his buddies and himself off the hook for their 1985 frame job. And again, this whole investigation was turned over to Calumet County. So why are all of these Manitowoc County sheriff's officers even coming out of retirement, coming out of the woodwork to plant evidence? Kind of weird. Why are they even there? He had motive himself. It looked like there was going to be a deep dive into the entire Penny Bernstein case, and certainly some of the players involved would roll over on each other, so he seals the deal in the sketchiest aspect of this entire case. The mystery remains. I can't believe this hasn't been discussed more frequently over the years. So another interesting post here by user since deleted. I mean, the coincidence stack is just going to get higher. Who played basketball with the Calumet County coroner? And I mean, these researchers, I mean, they go deep. They go deep. So they dug up articles from November 29th, 1969, Manitowoc Herald Times. And Mike Bushman is indeed a basketball player who was called in with the K-9 unit to help investigate a vicious sexual assault in the city of Manitowoc just 2 weeks before the attack on Penny Bernstein. Oh yeah, that guy again. And yeah, he married into a family that has been in the funeral home business for a long time in Manitowoc and Valders, but his wife is not involved in the business, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't pull a favor or two, though. What is much more interesting is the Sipple funeral home. You have Deputy Sipple playing a key role in the burn pit bones. You have a client of Teresa Halbach's named Craig Sipple. And there's a funeral home in New Holstein named Sipple Funeral Home. The Sipple and Halbach families are very prominent in that area. Many Halbachs have used the Sipple Funeral Home over the years, and their families are even connected through marriage. Wow. Okay. So apparently, law enforcement are just involved in the funeral home business and salvage yard business. How convenient to cover up anything that needs to be covered up. Very convenient. Holy, on the other responses here, holy expletive, I knew the name. Remember the hit and run of Ricky Hostetler in 1999? Well, yup, Deputy Bushman was head of the investigation. Here is where it is reported on the connection. USA Today Network, Wisconsin. John Farrak. Missteps Hamper, 1999, hit and run death probe. Ricky Hostetler was killed walking home from a friend's house during a snowstorm in 1999. The hit and run driver was never identified. The cold case has been plagued for years of long-standing allegations of a cover-up involving the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. See, the other thing about the coincidence theorists, the authority-worshipping cultists, they keep hallucinating that there's no way that Manitowoc is corrupt, where you have just this history of corruption in all these cases. I mean, it's not like it's just one or two cases. I mean, it's seemingly all these cases reported on in the newspapers about these allegations of corruption. The demonstrable 1985 frame-up of Steven Avery. I mean, how many other cases do we not even know about where there's frame-ups? I mean, the most shocking thing at this point is how sloppy the frame-ups and cover-ups are. So perhaps, I mean, I don't know. This is all just really, really weird. But continuing this article here, from the start, the criminal investigation into the 99 hit-and-run death of teenager Ricky Hostetler was seriously flawed. And was that by design? From insufficient follow-up to the discovery of vehicle parts near the pedestrian's killing, to the failure to seek assistance from the Wisconsin Department of Justice or the Wisconsin State Patrol, to using faulty evidence collection procedures. Is that kind of like not switching gloves between examining Avery's Grand Am and the RAV4, which may or may not have been Teresa Halbach's, on the Avery Salvage Yard property? The missteps may have prevented the boy's killer from being brought to justice, a review by US Today Network Wisconsin found. Shortly after Hostetler, 17, was struck while walking home on the side of the country road, residents in rural Manitowoc County began finding broken vehicle parts in the snow. On the morning of the fatality, Robert Jeffrey of Newton found parts scattered in the snow at the seldom used intersection of Center and Newton roads in rural Newton. If the fleeing driver had turned onto Center Road, the village of Cleveland was about 5 minutes away. Several sources who had ties to the investigation suspected that the hit-and-run driver was probably headed towards Cleveland. But this critical clue soon fell by the wayside under the direction of Lieutenant Mike Bushman, the road deputy put in charge of the homicide by then Manitowoc County Sheriff Tom Kusarek. Another familiar name here. According to Bushman's report, the Newton resident was unable to tell me which direction the suspect vehicle may have went after the pieces fell off. Another major misstep occurred just 5 days after the fatality. Who's who in Ricky Hostetler's homicide? On the day of Hostetler's funeral, multiple car parts were visible in the thawing snow at the far edge of the victim's driveway along Manitowoc County CR. The boy's body was found 50 yards up the road. The parts were right up the road, Manitowoc resident Sylvia Schmidt told USA Today Network Wisconsin. I just remembered I was thinking this doesn't look like it had been weathered. The parts appeared to be a section of headlight housing with letters and numbers stamped into it. Manitowoc Sheriff's Deputy Jason Jost reported at the time. Another familiar name. I also observed 3 other pieces of plastic lying just around the corner, Jost's January 15, 1999 report stated. All 4 of the parts appeared to be from a newer style car, Jost wrote. There had been no other recent collisions along the two-lane highway around the time of her son's death, said Debbie Hostetler, the victim's mother. Nevertheless, Bushman determined that these fresh car parts were not relevant to his investigation. You really can't make this stuff up, people. I mean, is it possible that all of these Manitowoc County Sheriff's officers, they just simply have some kind of mental disabilities? They're just not operating with a full deck, and it's incompetence instead of corruption? Or maybe it's a mix of both. Perhaps it's a mix of both. But I mean, how dumb do they have to be to think that other people will just lap this stuff up with zero critical thinking? I mean, it's kind of weird from that perspective. Kind of weird. I checked with Lieutenant Bushman, and due to the fact that the pieces looked newer, he did not believe they belonged to the suspect vehicle on the hit-and-run fatality, Jost wrote in his 99 report. At this time, no further follow-up will need to be done. So the solution is just to not investigate at all because they look kind of new. I mean, do they have all these other solid leads that they're working on? Like, they got nothing, and then they're saying this is also nothing. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, this is just mind-boggling, mind-shocking, if you will. It was probably part of the vehicle that killed Ricky, she told USA Today Network Wisconsin. Document state gives Manitowoc County suggestions to solve the Hostetler hit-and-run. DCI interviews Rob Herman's ex-girlfriend. A review of the Sheriff's Department's case file indicated Manitowoc County never explored the possibility that a car might be involved in the crime. I mean, yeah, hit and run, definitely no car involved. Oh, man, just when you think this case can't get any crazier, like the way they investigate other cases in Manitowoc, I mean, at least they're consistent. I mean, you gotta give them that. They seem to be consistent. Within hours of the overnight crash, Juvenile Detention Center Lieutenant Rob Herman, now the county sheriff, assured Bushman that the hit-and-run vehicle was an 85 to 88 Chevy truck, Suburban, or Blazer. I mean, how would he know? Unless he was the one who did it. Days later, Bushman speculated that the tiny pieces of broken grill found along the rural highway may also belong to an 88 to 91 full-size van. It seemed that every decision Herman and Bushman made put Manitowoc County further away from identifying Ricky Hostetler's killer. I mean, is it possible this level of stupidity is not corruption or cover-up? Is it possible? I mean, I don't know. Manitowoc County Sheriff Robert Herman, a misdirected investigation. Within hours of the crime, Herman directed the law enforcement agency to obtain a larger master vehicle registry from the state, based solely on vehicles he wanted Manitowoc County to look for. So basically, if he was the perpetrator or he knew the perpetrator and they wanted to cover it up, he would clearly have the means and ability to make sure nobody looked in the right direction. UPS overnight delivered a large packet from the DOT of all 85 to 88 Chevrolets and 85 to 88 GMC trucks, Bushman wrote in his January 14th, 1999 report. Contact was made with several local police administrators by phone, and a request for assistance was made. This was a recipe for disaster, the DCI discovered several years after the fact. There were numerous instances when Manitowoc deputies inadvertently checked the same vehicle 3 or 4 times. I mean, again, is it possible this is just sheer stupidity? Is it possible? Is Hanlon's razor a factor in the Hostetler, in the Penny Bernston, in the Teresa Hallback cases? Is it a factor? Never mistake for malice what can adequately be explained by stupidity. This is what Bushman told state agents in 2004. Bushman stated that the Wisconsin Department of Transportation provided the Sheriff's Department with a list of approximately 25,000 vehicles in a 5-county area that matched the description of the striking vehicle, and all of them were cleared. Seriously? They checked 25,000 vehicles? I find that hard to believe that they have this kind of diligence just based on all these other things, but anyway. Timeline of key events in Manitowoc County's hit-and-run death of Ricky Hostetler. The DCI, however, was troubled by Manitowoc County's overall investigation methods on Hostetler's case. In reviewing the reports, many of the vehicles that were reportedly cleared do not have detailed descriptions of how they were cleared. Special Agent Eric Stetkowski advised Bushman. This review assumes that every officer did a physical inspection of every vehicle, looking closely for signs of repaired, replaced parts in areas that were damaged or could have been damaged. If each officer for each vehicle inspected did not follow that procedure, there is a possibility that the striking vehicle was missed. Even though there were strong suspicions that the hit-and-run driver had roots in southern Manitowoc County, given the hit-and-run driver's path of travel, Bushman and Herman's decisions kept department efforts focused elsewhere. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. How the web is weaved with the same names coming up again and again. So, also interesting, some people dug up these old newspaper articles from 1965 regarding all of these individuals. Herman, Pfeffer, and even Scott Tadiaisace's grandfather, Victor Tadiaisace. And apparently they have so they founded a bank or something, and then, I mean, they're all connected. That's really weird. I mean, again, you would, obviously some names would continue to come up, but it's just, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Weird. So apparently, Scott Tadiaisace's grandfather was a prominent member of the business community in Manitowoc. Perhaps the apple fell very far from the tree, skipping a generation. Okay. So this Pfeffer funeral home, this is Mike Bushman's wife's family's funeral home, as we mentioned before. Okay. So a lot of coincidences regarding Mike Bushman. I mean, does it strike anyone else as odd that he just randomly comes out of retirement and shows up on a location that has been ceded to a different county due to conflict of interest and just starts so-called investigating and happens to be the one to find all this so-called evidence in the barrel, Cuss Road, everything? Does anybody else find that weird? And then, of course, his wife's family also cremates Carmen Boutwell's remains, which may have been swapped for Hallbacks. I mean, clearly, Bushman has motive, means, and opportunity. Again, this is MINDSHOCK. The only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure, but we recognize Mike Bushman has motive, means, and opportunity. That's clearly established. A very interesting, some posts here just as a quick recap. Thanks for highlighting Bushman's involvement, though I'm not really sure what to make of any of this. Do you think Hallback was cremated at Bushman's wife's funeral home and that's how he had the bones to plant? If the police were involved in the actual murder and had Hallback's remains, they wouldn't need anything from Carmen Boutwell. And the answer here is, if they didn't have Hallback's remains, then they needed Carmen Boutwell's. This is probably why every piece of evidence of her being dead was not positive, because those cremains were not hers. Partial match, in which, of course, Hallback could not be excluded, as well as many other individuals who could not have been excluded from that result, and no teeth. If they had her cremains, like you said, why not positively say that's her? Why the need for a partial match? Why not put a couple teeth there? It would have been identified quickly, and Ken Kratz didn't need to create the perceptions are what they are. So, yeah, that's very, very curious. In which case, is it possible Teresa Hallback was still alive at that time, but they either wanted her dead, either she was some kind of CI, if you haven't checked out the previous episodes about the auto trader fiascos and the possibility that it was a CI, or she just simply had some information on corrupt law enforcement in the area, and something happened. Maybe they had her, maybe they didn't, maybe they were keeping her alive for a particular reason, or maybe they just didn't have her at that time. Some people believe she's still alive, but either way, whether she's dead or alive, at that time they needed other bones to plant. So another solid post here regarding Bushman being the group leader of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office. officers at the scene of which they were not supposed to be at on Avery Salvage Yard. Here's a post by Miss Minkster. Retired Deputy Bushman was the group leader of the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office officers, including so-called bone finder Jost, who, in quotations, discovered the cell phone barrel the morning of November 7th, and not one Calumet County Sheriff's Office deputy anywhere in sight. So why was retired Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office Deputy Bushman, who was also one of Steven Avery's arresting officers in the 1985 frame-up, leading a search of law enforcement officers and not a group of volunteers as stated in the CASO report later that day? So who's fudging these CASO reports? So they said he led a group of volunteers as opposed to the actual Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office deputies who aren't even supposed to be there due to conflict of interest. That's weird. Why didn't Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office Deputy Siders mention that Bushman was retired in his testimony or in his report? Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office Deputy Siders' testimony, Day 6, page 149. Myself, along with Sergeant Scott Senglaub, Deputy Mike Bushman, and Sergeant Jason Jost responded to Avery Road, would be the Avery Salvage Yard, to assist Calumet County Sheriff's Department searching the property. Again, why is Calumet County not finding anything? I mean, out of all probability. What were your responsibilities upon arrival at the scene? We were to make contact with the officer in charge at the scene to get the daily duties. Okay, were you given a specific job that day? We were informed by the OIC officer in charge to get into search groups. The search group I was in was search group A. Our team leader of that search group was Deputy Mike Bushman of the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department. So in the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office Summary Report, page 13, November 7, 2005, 0800, I, Deputy Siders, along with Sergeant Senglaub, Sergeant Jost, and Deputy Mike Bushman, responded to Avery Auto Salvage to assist the CASO with searching the property and the surrounding area. The group which I was put in, which was Group A, and the team leader was Deputy Mike Bushman. Also in the group were officers from CASO and volunteer firefighters from surrounding fire departments, and the poster here in brackets, which CASO officers, because apparently that wasn't verified. While searching the land north of Steven Avery's residence, a cornfield, I came across a burning barrel which was in my section of area to search. The burning barrel was located out front of Steven's residence next to the cornfield. And the comment here, contrary to Siders' repeated mentions of the cornfield, this burn barrel is directly in front of Steven Avery's trailer. So it's a wonder it wasn't discovered sooner, say on the 5th or the 6th. I mean, the timeline with all the burn barrels, I went over this all in previous episodes. I mean, nothing really adds up here. But continuing the report here, I approached the burning barrel and looked inside. I observed some burnt, melted plastic items. As I looked closer at the plastic item, it appeared to me to be a cell phone. I noted there was an M emblem on the front of it. It appeared to be the emblem for a Motorola 5 brand cell phone. I showed Sergeant Senglaub these items, and he called the team leader, Deputy Mike Bushman, over to look at the items. Deputy Bushman observed the remains of what appeared to be a cell phone, contacted the OIC, and informed him we had some items that needed to be looked at by the detectives. We were informed that the DCI would be en route to our location to check out the items. However, based on DCI Heimerl's testimony, it was he and Seiler. Okay, anyway, does anybody believe that nobody would have just glanced in the barrels right next to the trailer? In the days I mean, really? I mean, then again, the RAV4 is not there and the helicopter flyover. So, I mean, make what you will of this case. The DCI did arrive at our location. However, the commentary here is Heimler and Seiler, wow, signed in at Avery property at 8 a.m., out at 8:26 a.m., and then returned at 9:40 a.m., out question mark, in at 10:08 a.m., out question mark, in at 12:02, out at 1:42 p.m., so this must have been in the 10 a.m. time frame. Back to the report here. They also believe that this was a cell phone. As they looked to the burning, the DCI informed me that they believed there were parts to a camera in there. The DCI informed Sergeant Senglaub and me, Deputy Siders, that they would take custody of the burning barrel. After the DCI took custody of the burning barrel, Sergeant Senglaub and I continued our search of the property. The commentary here is Siders and Senglaub signed out at 12:30. 5:30 p.m. So basically, they're kind of, the commentary here is that none of this report adds up. But okay, another theory here. This is going to be another McGuire theory here. Again, I'm not alleging it is true or untrue. So just based on all this information with Bushman, the funeral home, the searches, the timeline's not adding up. Is it possible they did not have Hallback, or even her vehicle, or her camera, or her phone at the time of their plan to plant Carmen Boutwell's bones to be a stand-in for Hallback's bones in this Avery frame-up? Now, what if they did have her? Now, again, maybe they never actually got her, but possibly they got her cell phone and or camera and or other things at a later time, so they could only plant it later. So they didn't have it to plant in the first days. They had to plant it later. So obviously these burn barrels would have been searched. Obviously all these areas would have been looked at prior, but they didn't have the evidence to plant. That's why it shows up later. So this was kind of an evolving plan, so to speak. And then maybe they really did kill Hallback later, but at that point, I mean, what kind of swapping could be done? Because they did send something to the FBI crime lab. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces here. So if the frame-up job evolved as it went along, does that account for all the problems? Because no doubt this is not a perfect frame job by any scope of the imagination. This seems to be a collection of mostly dumb individuals attempting this frame-up job, which is why there's all this obvious, blatant nonsense when examining the case. And perhaps one or two people with a little bit of brains, but the timeline was not ideal. Again, Murphy's Law here. For whatever reason, coincidence theorists either think that criminals pull off conspiracies without a hitch, or there is no conspiracy. It's really weird how these Dunning-Kruger goofs, Gilters, whoever you want, or in other conspiracies too, these coincidence theorists, it's like they're too mentally deficient to understand that, first of all, not all criminals are geniuses, and even if they are, things go wrong. The unexpected happens, not only to geniuses, but also to dumb criminals. So it's not like every conspiracy would go off without a hitch. I mean, this isn't rocket science, but for whatever reason, these goofs have a lot of trouble with this. But continuing on here, what happened to team leader Deputy Bushman? This was Bushman's day. Signed it at 7:38 a.m., 7:38 a.m., with Todd Herman, another buddy there. Out at question mark, in at 12:50, out at question mark, in at 4:15 p.m., out at 4:45 p.m., in at question mark, out at 5:33 p.m. According to Dietering report, CASO page 137, by 10:35 a.m., retired Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office Deputy Inspector Michael Bushman had discovered a passable burial site at Cuss Road, which tied up he and other CASO officers and other DCI most of the afternoon. That is curious. Who were the CASO officers with these Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputies during the cell phone barrel discovery? There were 24 CASO officers signed in during the time frame the barrel was found. Also on the property, Ryan Hilligus and Scott Blodorn, in at 9:03 a.m. and out at 9:53 a.m. So a former ex-boyfriend allowed on the property. No conflict of interest there. Not only does Siders fail to mention which CASO officers were on his team, not one CASO officer writes a report on the cell phone barrel discovery. The first mention of it is in Baldwin's report, CASO page 135. Does anybody else find that suspicious? So CASO, the non-conflict of interest county, supposedly, or at least less conflict of interest, they're not involved in this? They can't verify anything by Bushman and his team? I mean, what are the Gilters making of all of this information? I mean, the level of mental gymnastics one has to do to hallucinate that this is all on the up and up. I mean, this is in excess of this is Olympic level mental gymnastics. I mean, Olympic gymnasts would be jealous of these kind of performances to justify this investigation as legitimate in any way. And Baldwin's report at approximately 1:15 p.m., I was requested to stand by the garage burn barrel at Steven Avery's house until evidence technicians arrived on scene. I did stand by with this until approximately 3:39 p.m. when the barrel was covered by Calumet County Sheriff's Deputy Ken Matuzak. So another coincidence here, November 7th was Mike Bushman's only day on the Avery property during the 9-day search, but it sure was a productive one. So you have all these dozens of officers. They got nothing. Bushman shows up and magically he's getting all this stuff done. He's finding cell phones. He's finding burial sites at Cuss Road. So this rusty, out of practice deputy comes out of retirement and is leading search team on the property of the guy that he arrested and framed for the 1985 Penny Biernston assault. Is everybody following this? I mean, this is clearly all on the up and up, right? I mean, you really can't make this stuff up. If this was a movie, a Hollywood script, this would get rejected because nobody would believe this level of plot holes that anything would happen this way. Man, you can't make this stuff up. Couple more follow-ups here. Was this the day one of the barrels came back and Ertl was dragged away to Cuss Road? The original poster responded here, yes. Dragged away to Cuss Road by Bushman's possible burial site. Isn't that convenient? Another response here, obviously with the tight ship they were running security-wise, it wouldn't have been difficult for anyone to come in the front, sign in, then leave, return to the property without being detected. That being said, when you were writing reports after the fact, which I have no doubt they did, you can try to be consistent. But with this with a case this involved, you are bound to trip yourself up. Bushman could not have been the team leader at the same time he was finding a possible burial site elsewhere. Furthermore, why aren't team leaders active duty officers? That way, if there is a discovery or important event, there's an active law enforcement there to document and call the right people, etc. If you think about this, it would be brilliant if law enforcement was conspiring to plant evidence. A retired deputy doesn't have a job to lose or a career to kill. He is already done. Response here, exactly. I would chalk it up to Siders getting his report wrong, except he also testified that Deputy Mike Bushman was the team leader. Based on the cross-reference I did with all these half-ass reports, it looks like the cell phone barrel was found around 9 to 9:30, 9:45 at the latest, and DCI met Siders and another officer at the barrel of between 10:15 and 10:30. Bushman was gone after they found that barrel. Could risk having DCI or Queso document he was there, I guess. Couldn't risk that. And makes his Cuss Road ruckus around 10:30. Also, Ryan and Scott were on the property around that time too. But yeah, why the hell is a retired deputy the team leader for law enforcement? In the Queso report, Dietering and I believe Tyson too refer to him as retired but leading a group of volunteers. Another response here, like I said all along, there are only two options to explain this case. Every questionable occurrence, look at the officers around. These officers that keep popping up at the best times or find all the pertinent evidence. Either number one, they are all cognitively impaired to the point they shouldn't or couldn't function as officers. Or number two, they knew what was going on and now are playing the game. I wasn't aware, can't recall, didn't know, we aren't supposed to do that card. Come on, man. Somebody knew. So Siders claimed he had turned custody of the barrel over to Heimerl and Seiler after they examined it. This had to be after Heimerl and Seiler's 10:08 a.m. sign-in at the property. In Heimler's testimony on page 153, he says it was in his custody until it was transported to Queso or wherever. Quote, he did not know specifically where it went, end quote. Solid chain of custody there. But Heimerl and Seiler signed out at some unknown time after they took custody of the barrel, then back at 12:02 p.m. At 1:15, it was turned over to Baldwin, and Heimler and Seiler signed out of Avery's at 1:42 p.m. It's not transported to Queso until 3:39 p.m. So it wasn't exactly on Hermes' testimony as he stated in his testimony, in Hermes' custody as he stated in his testimony. I mean, this is the worst chain of custody ever. I mean, anyone could plant anything at any time. But the actual question Kratz asked was, quote, now evidence this burn barrel included eventually was taken off-site or to a central repository or a central place where it is held. Is that your understanding? Hermes responds, yes. WTF kind of question is that? So what I get out of that is that the evidence in the barrel was in Hermes' custody and transported to Queso or wherever, but the actual barrel was being guarded by Baldwin and transported to Queso at 3:39. So basically, it's all shady as hell and made more obvious by the way Kratz parses his words, then quickly moves on to the next subject. Yeah, Ken Kratz is one special kind of prosecutor. That can't be denied. So another post here. Heimo was also involved in the March 1st and 2nd, 2006 searches of the Avery garage. He found 2 bullet fragments during this search. One was located in a crack in the floor and did not yield evidence. The other was found towards the rear of the garage. Hallback DNA was extracted from this fragment. That's curious. That is very curious. Huh. Other post here. What were Scott and Ryan doing there? That's a very good question. Probably bringing over Teresa Hallback's cell phone and camera, or any cell phone and camera, to dump in Bushman's barrel. Great post. Interesting to say the least. What was Mike Bushman's motive? Definitely a motive. My theory being that the barrel and items were collected and burned somewhere else and then returned for discovery. What was Bushman's motive? I don't know, other than he was involved in Steven Avery's 85 case. Other than that, he seemed like a pretty decent guy with other news stories I read about him. However, he was involved in the search for Gregory Allen 2 weeks before Penny Bjornson was attacked. After the attempted rape and assault on young women who lived near Penny Bjornson, Bushman was called in to do a search with his canine. This was on July 15, 1985. Penny Bjornson assault was on July 29th. I don't know if he had a vested interest in getting Steven Avery convicted because he feared he might somehow get drawn into the civil suit. He knew the perp they were looking for that night was Gregory Allen, and then a week later he arrests Steven Avery for Penny Bjornson's assault. And then, of course, the Hostetler case, he seemed intentionally botched as well, so I don't know if I would call Mike Bushman a good guy. Here's another interesting post. I always had this question. Why did it take them so long to find the barrel at Steven's house? They found Barb's burn barrels on, what, the 5th and hauled them away and brought one back before they found this one. Why didn't they take the one that was right in front of Steven's plane? Who was their chief suspect? Maybe because they needed a nice receptacle for their deposits. Oh, man. Oh, man. Another post here. Problem with the barrels are not how many of them and how they've moved in or out. Problem is the dates and its context. The first bones had been found in Barb's barrel number 2 on November 6th. Bones. Wow, you would think the normal investigation reaction should be, high alert, let's get the coroner here, let's look around immediately, let's look inside other barrels and pit at the same date, right? Wrong. They did nothing. Steven Avery barrel was found the day after November 7th, and the pit was not available, occupied by dog. And of course, we've gone over that multiple times. Apparently, they don't have any animal control. They don't have any dog handling officers. They simply do not care enough to just draw the dog away with food or whatever, which can easily be done. Okay, 2 days later, November 8th, and of course, no coroner, no photos, no videos, no grid, nothing. Just a bunch of human bones collected in a garbage bag. Nothing to see here, people. Clearly this investigation is on the up and up. Another response here, big problem with the barrels. They were so compromised, I'm surprised they were admissible at all. Seizing and then returning one of them, what kind of law enforcement does that? Then Ken Kratz tells them, no, you should have kept that barrel, so they go get it again. Meanwhile, the chain of custody is broken. I mean, how is there a chain of custody in the first place? Looking at all these reports, it looks like there was no traceable chain of custody in the first place. The barrels, like so much else in this case, became questionable because of their handling of them. Another response, that would have been the perfect day to do it with this distraction taking place. The next day was the day the bones were discovered, the key was found, and the license plates were found. So basically, once a certain narrative was spun, all of a sudden everything could be found where it wasn't found before. Another post here, it is interesting that he came in with Herman. He obviously had no credentials of his own to justify his being there, let alone being assigned as team leader. How on earth were they able to pull off the lie that Calumet was in charge? Another post here, great catch. Every time he signed in, it was either with Herman, Jost, or other Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office. How on earth did they get away with lying about Bushman's status with Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office in court? There is now no piece of crucial evidence in this case that isn't tainted by Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office. That's a great point right there. I mean, is there any evidence that isn't tainted, so to speak? Another response here. With enough time and resources, I think you can line up testimony with reports and other discovery materials, vet the investigation, and find plenty of instances of perjury, false reports, or other potential misconduct. In this instance, the beauty of the setup, if there is one, is Bushman is retired and likely doesn't have to do any reporting or other obligations, and Jost was never called to testify, even though he found the bones and whatnot. Doing advanced cross-checking in real time at trial without knowing who would be called and what their testimony would be in advance would have been hard for the defense to do. Last post here, Manitowoc County Sheriff's Office were supposed to only be assisting with resources. Right. I guess this meant providing the resource who arrested him in 1985. No conflict of interest to see here. Oh man, you definitely cannot make this stuff up. So there you have it, the chronicles of Mike Bushman and his circle of good old boys in Manitowoc County. What do all the MindShock listeners think of Mike Bushman and the Steven Avery case and his history with Steven Avery and these other individuals? Their names just keep popping up. That's it for now. Plenty more to come. Hope you guys enjoyed another edition of the MindShock podcast in the Steven Avery series. If you enjoyed the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Help us come out with more mind-shocking content to keep up awareness in wrongful convictions, cold cases, missing persons cases, and more. Like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.